In just a few decades, China has turned countless impossible projects, once dismissed by Western experts, into reality shocking the world. Today, we're counting down 10 megaprojects, where China ranks #1 globally. Each one pushes the limits of what infrastructure can achieve. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the term infrastructure powerhouse is more than just a label. Number 10. Hong Kong Zhuhai Macao Bridge. In the Ling-Dingyang waters, where typhoons strike up to 6 times a year and waves can reach 6 meters high, building a bridge that allows 300,000-ton ships to pass and even lets cars travel underwater was once considered impossible by Western experts. But China proved otherwise. In just 7 years, engineers overcame the challenge of installing 33 immersed tunnel sections, each 180 meters long and weighing 80,000 tons, comparable to a medium-sized aircraft carrier. At a depth of 40 meters underwater, they completed 33 precise connections, known as deep-sea kisses, creating a world-class engineering miracle. In May 2017, the final tunnel section was installed in near-zero visibility, using sonar and robotic systems. The margin of error was just 1.5 centimeters, thinner than a finger, setting a new world record for underwater precision. Since opening in 2018, the 55-kilometer structure remains the longest sea-crossing bridge in the world, reducing travel time between Hong Kong and Zhuhai from 3 hours to just 30 minutes. As of April 2026, traffic continues to hit new highs. This project demonstrates the precision and capability behind a true world-leading achievement. Number 9. Shenzhen Zhongshan Link. If a Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macao bridge is like a dragon across the sea, the Shenzhen-Zhongshan Link is a giant beast beneath it. This project holds 10 world records and represents a new level of engineering complexity. After opening in June 2024, travel time between Shenzhen and Zhongshan dropped from 2 hours to just 30 minutes. Yet only 7 years earlier, this area was open sea. Engineers achieved multiple global firsts here. The world's longest and widest immersed tunnel, made of steel shell concrete at 5,035 meters, the largest offshore anchor foundation equivalent to 10 swimming pools, and the highest sea bridge deck. A total of 32 tunnel sections, each weighing 80,000 tons, were assembled at a depth of 50 meters under pressure equal to 5 atmospheres. Using an innovative integrated prefabricated underwater push-in final joint, engineers achieved millimeter-level precision during final closure, once again setting new global standards for deep-sea construction. As of April 2026, traffic continues to rise. This golden corridor has completely broken the east-west barrier of the Pearl River estuary. Number 8. China's high-speed rail. In 2019, a satellite image shocked the world. China's landmass was covered by a dense silver network of high-speed rail. This is now the longest high-speed rail network in the world, with a total operating length of 48,000 kilometers, accounting for over 70% of the global total, and 6 times that of Japan, the second-ranked country. Back in 2008, when the Beijing-Tianjin line opened, Western media criticized it as just assembled imported technology. But by 2017, the Fuxing trains were launched, achieving 84% domestically developed standards and full independent intellectual property. Operating at 350 kilometers per hour, the highest commercial speed in the world, these trains can travel from Beijing to Shanghai in just 4 hours. Inside the cabin, even a coin can stand upright for 8 minutes without falling. From -40 degrees Celsius in Harbin to 50 degrees Celsius in Turpan, from permafrost to seismic zones, China's high-speed rail has adapted to some of the most complex geological conditions on Earth, making it the most versatile high-speed rail system in the world. With international expansion and next-generation trains, like the CR450 entering testing, China's high-speed rail continues to hold its global lead. Number 7. Three Gorges Dam. In 1994, construction began on what would become one of the largest water engineering projects in human history. After 17 years of construction, over $200 billion in investment, and the relocation of more than 1 million people, the Three Gorges Dam remains both remarkable and controversial. standing 185 meters tall and 2,309 meters long. It is the world's largest hydropower station in terms of installed capacity. With a total storage capacity of 39.3 billion cubic meters, it has raised flood protection standards in the Yangtze River Basin from a once in 10-year event to a once in 100-year level, preventing disasters like the devastating 1998 floods. In 2025 alone, it generated over 95.7 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity, equivalent to saving 50 million tons of coal annually. Combined with other major dams, it forms a massive clean energy corridor. Its ship locks can handle up to 50 million tons annually, and its ship lift allows vessels of up to 3,000 tons to pass like an elevator, setting multiple world records in water engineering. Number 6. South-North Water Transfer Project. Northern China has only 1/4 of the per capita water resources of the South. In Beijing, the figure is even lower, less than 1/10 of the international severe water scarcity threshold. To solve this, China launched the largest, longest, and most impactful water diversion project in the world. With over $500 billion in investment and 400,000 people relocated, this project took 62 years to realize a vision first proposed in 1952. The eastern route uses a system of 13 pumping stations to lift water northward along ancient canals, forming the world's largest pumping station network. The central route stretches 1,432 kilometers, delivering water entirely by gravity across the Yellow River to Beijing, the longest gravity-fed system in the world. As of October 2025, the project has exceeded its initial targets. Today, about 70% of Beijing's water comes from the south. This is not just an engineering project. It's a system that reshapes how resources are distributed. Number 5. West to East Power Transmission. The West has energy. The East needs it. But electricity can't be transported like goods, and long-distance transmission usually means massive energy loss. China solved this with ultra-high voltage (UHV) technology, creating the largest and most advanced power transmission network in the world. At plus or minus 1,100 kV, electricity can be transmitted over 5,000 kilometers with only about 7% loss. These electric highways now span the country. With over $520 billion invested, this system rivals the scale of the Three Gorges project. From mountainous regions where workers built towers on cliffs to major hubs like Sichuan with multiple UHV lines, this network has become the backbone of national energy distribution. Number 4. Fast Radio Telescope. Completed in 2016, the FAST telescope in Guizhou is the largest and most sensitive single-dish radio telescope in the world. With a 500-meter diameter, about the size of 30 football fields, and 4,450 adjustable panels, it can actively track celestial objects like a giant eye. Its sensitivity is 10 times greater than the former Arecibo Observatory in the United States. It can detect signals from 13.7 billion light-years away, enabling research into pulsars, fast radio bursts, and even the search for extraterrestrial life. Since opening to the world in 2021, it has supported thousands of research projects from dozens of countries, discovering over 900 pulsars, leading the world in both efficiency and output. This eye of the sky has become a shared tool for humanity to explore the universe. Number 3. Beijing Daxing International Airport. Opened in 2019, this airport, designed in the shape of a spreading phoenix, has been ranked as one of the new 7 wonders of the world. It is the largest single-terminal airport building in the world, covering 1.4 million square meters. Its radial design allows passengers to reach the furthest gate within 8 minutes on foot, one of the most efficient layouts ever built. With over 8,000 uniquely shaped glass panels and innovative structural design, it also achieves high energy efficiency. Even more impressive is the construction speed. Built in just 4 years, compared to 8 to 10 years for similar airports elsewhere. It stands as a new global benchmark for airport design and construction. Number 2. Sichuan Tibet Railway. Connecting Chengdu to Lhasa may not seem far on a map, but the elevation difference exceeds 3,000 meters. This is one of the most challenging railway projects ever attempted. It crosses 14 major rivers and 21 peaks above 4,000 meters. Over 95% of some sections consist of bridges and tunnels, with some tunnels extending more than 1,000 meters deep. Extreme altitude reduces machine efficiency by 40%, while earthquakes, landslides, and permafrost make construction even more difficult. With an investment exceeding $300 billion, it is expected to be completed by 2030. Once finished, travel time between Chengdu and Lhasa will be reduced to around 13 hours, transforming connectivity in one of the most remote regions on Earth. Number 1. Taklamakan Desert Edge Stabilization Project. This is one of the largest, most difficult, and longest-running ecological restoration projects in human history. Since 1978, efforts have been underway to stop the expansion of the Taklamakan Desert by building a massive protective barrier around it, like stitching the edges of fabric to prevent it from unraveling. At first, it seemed insignificant, just more greenery, a road here, a small change there. But over more than 40 years, across generations, hundreds of thousands of people have worked to transform the landscape. On November 28, 2024, the final 285-kilometer gap was closed, completing a 3,046-kilometer ecological barrier encircling the desert. This project doesn't just stop desert expansion, it offers a new model for combating desertification worldwide. But the work is not over. This is a long-term commitment that will continue for decades, even centuries. These projects are not just concrete and steel. They represent the combined effort of an entire population. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.